Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. It is February the 2nd. I guess it is the beginning of Black History Month, which is not my favorite thing. I think it's kind of dumb. So I've got a little clip that we're going to play about Rosa Parks that I found interesting, coming from the folks over at The Blaze and a guy named John Doyle. Yeah, we had a really big weekend when it came for news. Starting on Friday, it seemed like everybody was just like, whatever it is, just throw it. We had DOJ released apparently millions of files over on the Epstein situation, as to quote J.D. Vance, that's what he called it, the Epstein situation. That situation is confusing. It's full of a bunch of messy, sloppy stuff. I'm going to try to make a little sense of it. I did not try to read 3 million files. I won't even pretend like I'm going to do something like that. There were over 180,000 photographs, 2,000 videos, and some other strange audio and stuff like that. So we've got some things that we're going to talk about on there, but this is going to be an ongoing situation as people continue to look through it. What I want to do is try to provide some context, what is being said by DOJ, what is being said by victims, and then I also want to give you an understanding on when you see some of these documents. I want to give you a primer on how to read some of them, because there is some FBI knowledge that's required to look at these files. Things like what a 302 is. You guys have probably seen that now since the Mar-a-Lago raid. You've seen it since we've done January 6th stuff, and a lot of people are more familiar with FBI paperwork probably than any time in American history. But that doesn't mean that you know what things like NTALK mean or what that actually implies or what goes on over there. So we're going to talk about a little bit of that, because I did see various emails, various salacious allegations and some of this stuff. So we're going to talk Epstein. There's kind of a strange story about Erika Kirk that's popping out. There was a data dump of a Zoom call that took place just a couple of days after the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Just as a general prelude, I don't much care for people that are like Erika Kirk, because I think they're flashy and they're the opposite of what I'm interested in. So like, I wouldn't have liked her before, and I didn't think great things about her. She acted very strangely, and apparently if you point that out, like a comedian, a guy named JP Sears, who I think is brilliant, if you do that, then you're being an attacker and you're being inappropriate, even though we're kind of in this little world where I think everybody can agree that the quote unquote grieving widow story that we keep getting told to eat, it's not palatable. It's slop. And so there's some Fox News coverage. And when you have an OnlyFans model that's running cover for the so-called conservative grieving widow, that's all really strange. It's very bizarre to me. So we'll touch on that. So that covers Epstein, that covers Erika, and then the Dan and Don in the title of today's episode. We've got the return of Dan Bongino. I've got some thoughts about that, and it's not super relevant to my life, honest to God, other than I got a bunch of different messages, people saying, "Are you going to continue in your time slot?" Well, yeah, I am going to continue my time slot. I was here for the last 3 years. Dan came and went. He's going to do his thing. If you guys are joining the program, very much appreciate you guys being part of it. And I hope that you benefit from some of the things that we're talking about here. And I always benefit from you guys in the comments. Before we get deeper into that, and then of course, Don Lemon, the indictment for Don Lemon, we're under total fascism and tyranny because now we're arresting journalists. Apparently nobody remembers what happened on January 6th of 2021. And then like the next 5 years afterwards that we all lived through. So that's what we're going to do with today's program, and maybe a little bit more in there, including the midterms are coming. The midterms are coming. Hold everything. The midterms are coming. Mike Johnson is bullish. I think that's actually terrible news for people in the Republican Party. And let's say thanks to one of our sponsors right now. How about the folks over at Patriot Protect? Folks, the online sphere continues to get more and more dangerous for your information being leaked out there. If you're a federal government employee, it probably is going to get hacked by the Chinese and leaked. Otherwise, there's all kinds of free stuff that's out there. These data broker warehouses that are out there selling access to, even just with clicks alone, your personal information. We're talking about your name, your phone number, your family members, your age, your online behavior. Maybe they can pull access to your voice and clone your voice. Maybe they will read some of your texts and use AI to synthesize how you actually type, and they can impersonate you with scam texts and spoof stuff. All of that is really scary. All of that stuff is the worst case scenario, because they can catch you at a bad moment and they can take all your things. The average American loses about $600 per year in fraud and scams, but they don't all happen at once. it's probably like $10,000 or $100,000 one time. If you don't want to be the person who keeps that average up and you want to remove your name from over 240 people search engines and data brokers online that are trying to sell access to your stuff, then use a service like Patriot Protect. That's what we use in this house. That's what my wife uses. That's what my folks use. It's patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Again, patriot-protect.com/KYLE. There is a link in the show description. You'll save 15% on an annual subscription, and it costs you like, I don't know, less than $10 a month to get the search and destroy protocol working to try to make sure this stuff is always going. It's running 24/7 in the background. It's keeping your stuff and scrubbing the dark web. It's looking for whether or not you're a victim of one of these data leaks, and then just trying to kind of, keep your data out of the pile of those scammers and fraudsters who despise you for being a bacon cheeseburger nationalist and are living in, I don't know, Nigeria or somewhere in Africa or India, just trying to take cash out of your pocket. Check them out again. The link in the show description, patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Lots of folks in my circle having success with that, and you will get less scam calls. So that's the smallest part of it, but it actually is helpful. All right, we're going to get into today's program, and we're going to start it right now. Okay, so it's Monday. It's the beginning of Black History Month, and I've got a Black History Month thing to start us off with. I had, and I think I've told the story more than once, and I think I tell it every February now. I had a team sergeant when I was in the Air Force when I was going through training. I won't mention his name, but he was one of the funnier guys I worked with. He also got super yoked at one point. He was like 155 pounds, 5'10", super fast runner. And then he bulked up to like 225 pounds and it was freakishly big. And he had like, those lats that touch your ears. And then he acted like a total meathead. But the one thing he always told me that's rubbed off on me, you have these one little moments that you can never shake from your military service. It was 3.5 years of my life that I will never forget certain parts of it. One of them is I will never make a bed without flipping the blankets and the sheets under the tail end of the bed and calling it tail gunning. I had a guy make a bed with me in basic training. He said that. And I'll never forget that my team sergeant said that he doesn't actually believe in February. He just believes in January 32nd through the end to like January 60th. Because he hated Black History Month. He hated the idea of Black History Month. And I think a lot of people do. It was kind of sold as a bill of goods. It feels unnecessary in 2026 America, and it actually feels to me like something we've honed in on that is trying to make an issue of something that doesn't actually exist. And it wouldn't exist. Maybe but for Barack Obama, it would be completely gone. Anyway, here's a little thing from John Doyle kind of debunking some of the myths. I thought this was a good way to start off February because I kind of sit there and hang out with what my buddy used to say.
Day one of exposing Black history because it literally didn't even happen. So we all know the story, right? 1955, Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks, she's this tired seamstress. She refuses to give up her seat to this white guy after a long day's work because her feet hurt. She gets arrested for this and then it sparks a bus boycott. She becomes the mother of the civil rights movement. She's now remembered as a brave hero who stood up to power. The entire thing was a planned publicity stunt from the beginning. By 1955, Rosa Parks was already like an experienced left-wing activist. She and her husband were attending Communist Party meetings. Also, her husband owned a car. So this is not even the first time this happened. Black people were getting arrested for this stuff, but the NAACP and the activists ignored them, and Rosa Parks was specifically selected as the perfect subject for this agenda. She was polite, she was employed, she was married, she was seen as somebody who would be sympathetic to white people. And actually, the Rosa Parks incident itself was actually a reproduction of a prior incident where they planned to make a different woman into this kind of figurehead, but then they found out that she got pregnant out of wedlock, and so they had to sub her out for old Rosa. What's funny too is that she actually had to ride around on a few different buses before this happened, since the rules weren't really meant for women. They weren't really enforced on female passengers. Also, she wasn't even exhausted. She admitted in her autobiography that she refused the seat not because she was physically tired, but because she was tired of giving in to injustice. But that wasn't her first run-in with that bus driver either. James F. Blake in 1943, Blake kicked her off the bus entirely, yet that incident got zero attention from the activists because she hadn't been chosen yet by the activists to play this role. Here's the kicker though, Montgomery lost segregated buses, but it didn't actually require black people to give up seats to white people if no other seats were available. Rosa Parks was sitting in the middle section, and she wasn't asked to move until more passengers started boarding. Basically, you had a white section, a middle section, and a black section, and the driver was trying to move the sign to expand the white section of the bus into some of the middle seats since there were a bunch of white people about to get on the bus. And so he asked Rosa Parks and a few black guys if they would move from the middle section into the black section, since it would literally be illegal illegal for him to tell the white passengers to go sit in the black section. So the guys were like, all right, yeah, whatever. But she went along with her plan, and so she was arrested because she wasn't listening to the bus driver. But she did not stop there at buses. She supported Malcolm.
All right, he goes on to talk about the other things she supported: Malcolm X, a bunch of radicals, Black Panthers, et cetera, et cetera. Like so many things that many of us have kind of realized in maybe the last 5 years for the first time, is that so much of what we are told is just one little piece of it. It is the crafted narrative. And it's not actually the entire truth. There's this concept, this Kamala Harris style Venn diagram. So many things are both fake and gay. We're in the intersection of fake and gay on a regular basis, and we find out that, oh, okay, they told you one thing, but once you understand the context behind it, perhaps it doesn't actually hit the same way. This is the same thing when you start looking about what happened with Roe v. Wade and the woman they selected for that, and the fact that she changed her mind a bunch of times. So much of this media narrative was crafted and was actually easily sold at a time when, my father was involved in news. And it's kind of funny to listen to a man in his mid-70s who's called me up in the last 2 or 3 weeks. We've had this conversation, and he was like, I can't believe how much all of this was a lie. It's always a lie. It's always being sold to us. And he was in the business of trying to suss out what the truth is. And I know my dad to be an honest guy. It's very weird to kind of have this moment where you see that it's all fake. It's all production. And so are you going to be a consumer of the audience without any cynicism, without any skepticism? Or are you going to be a person that says, okay, that's an interesting story. I wonder what the rest of the story is. One of those things that I can't help, because today is a day that will be interesting for at least the Rumble platform. We're on a bunch of different places. And if you guys are watching us on Rumble, great. We appreciate it. Make sure you guys hit a like. If you're watching over on YouTube, same story. Appreciate the new growing YouTube audience. The funny thing is, in 2026, as a conservative, as a bacon cheeseburger nationalist, by the way, I found out that the X rating, this is X, the formerly known as Twitter website, apparently rates me as an anti-kosher, anti-Semite because of the bacon cheeseburger nationalist thing that I've come up with, which I actually think is just a cute way of talking about Christian nationalism in a form of a dietary product that many of us will actually consume. Apparently, even though Muslims also do not consume bacon, I'm anti-Semitic because I put bacon on the cheeseburger that's in my bio. Isn't that wild? And in all of that comes back to me in this weird way. By the way, the beef thing is kind of anti-Hindu or anti-vegan or whatever. And those are all true. Like, all those are true. Like, I am against people that have a problem with me eating simple American fare that you should be able to get at every diner. That doesn't even seem remotely controversial. And yet it is. And I'm flagged, which is why we get limited reach over there. And I also don't toe the line. I'm going to say what I think. If I think that you're acting like a retard, I'm going to say that this person is retarded. Kind of like the Speaker of the House is right now, telling people that he's bullish on midterms. But we're talking about the concept of censorship and this sort of quiet censorship. And so here's what's really amazing to me. Rumble, the platform that we launched this podcast and we're able to get the first audience. For those of you that are new and you're over on YouTube, and we appreciate you being there, we were stepped on pretty obviously to the point where there was zero growth that happened in this podcast for literally years. And then last year, it felt like the boot came off the neck, probably with the election of Donald Trump. So that's actually something to be sort of a fringe benefit of him being there. And I'm appreciative of that. But I have to insulate myself against the so-called free speech platform. And that's interesting because one of the people who decided to come out and attack me, and by the way, it had nothing to do with me and him. This guy, Dan Bongino, who's now going to come back and he's going to be the triumphant hero that many people, if you believe what's going on X, think lied to them overtly, like missed out on some of the biggest things. And I've got a great little clip of him because he went on Sean Hannity and talked about the thing that shook him down to his core again. And it's Crossfire Hurricane. It's revamping of old stuff. Nothing about Epstein. Nothing about the pipe bomber case, which he should have some real problems with. We got a story on that from Blaze. Nothing about any of the things that he talked about for years. It just goes back to this like old sort of previously adjudicated situation that the FBI did a bunch of ugly stuff. He got there and then he saw how ugly it was. And then his answer was turn around and leave. Here's what I see when I look for the bigger context. This is in the idea of the Rosa Parks story was a story, but there was narrative behind it. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a graph of the value of Rumble stock. And it is currently, as of yesterday's close, looks like, or maybe today's open, at $5.69 USD. And 1 year ago, we're showing the 1 year timeline, it was just north of $12. And so you have a drop in value of 53.4% in a 12-month period. Now, I'm not an expert on money, and I don't pretend to be, and I don't pretend to be an expert on stocks either, but I do know a few things about numbers, and I know that if one number, which was a huge chunk of your net worth, goes down by 53.4% in a period of a year, you are hemorrhaging net worth. So that doesn't sound very good. And from everything I can tell, I've done a couple of AI searches into it. It looks like Rumble stock continues for investors to be in the red when it comes to being able to provide any kind of dividends or any kind of value. So a lot of people are underwater with this stock. So that's also the case. Now, it doesn't have to just be the 1 year timeline. Bongino started working for the FBI March 17th of 2025. And on that day, the close was $8.11, still notably higher than today. So it's lost about 30% of its value, even in the time that he was over at the FBI for those 9 months, which he calls a year. I found something else kind of funny. The FBI was really good at lying, and I found that out right away when I got there. The lie that the FBI pontificates and tries to sell to the people that work there is that it is the oldest institution doing this thing since 1908. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has been finding bad guys. And then you go like, wait a minute, though. It was called the Bureau of Investigations, and nobody was armed, and they didn't actually resemble the modern FBI in 1908. That didn't happen until 1935, and that was done by an act of Congress. Why do we not say the birthday of the FBI is when the FBI became the FBI? It was one of my questions when I got there. Day one, they start telling you the history of your agency, and they're lying to you about their birthday, just like a woman on a date lying to you about her weight or her height or some other sort of relevant information. You'd go, what other things are you willing to lie to me about? That seems strange. And I give you, by contrast, I served in the Air Force, and the Air Force started when Congress declared it the Air Force. It used to be known as the Army Signal Corps and then the Army Air Corps, and they don't predate it to some like 1890s thing from the Army Signal Corps when they had balloons, and they don't call it something when the Army Air Corps was flying around in World War I. No, it's a post-World War II creation, 1947. I think it's in September, I should know, but we're not like the Marine Corps. We don't love it as much. Shouldn't you actually know when you actually became the thing that you're called? I just found that fascinating. And I also find it fascinating when someone says that they were there for a year when they were there for 9 months. I think it's fascinating when someone says that the reason they came back is because they always planned to come back, and that it has nothing to do with the fact that the massive net worth is hemorrhaging by 30% during the time that he was away from it. So I think that may be the case. There's another things that I didn't realize. The free speech platform of Rumble, which, again, I'm appreciative of having an opportunity of, but now I consider them kind of an enemy to what we're doing because we're constantly being censored. This story is something you guys may not have known. And the reason that I only almost always go to left-wing sources is because I want to know what the other side says. I want full context. I want to know if somebody was discrediting Rosa Parks in real time. If there is such a thing, I want to know what the op looks like so I can get an impression of it. The story you're seeing on here is coming from Forbes magazine. Forbes ran a story in end of July of 2025. And this is interesting because Chris Pavlovski, who owns Rumble, he's the founder of Rumble and owns the biggest chunk of it. He started off with porn domains, the names of porn stuff. And when you start reading this and you start dealing with people who have dealt with him in business, and they're like, yeah, he has like some strange people that work out of like Serbia, and he's got some Macedonians that work for him, and they're kind of scumbags. And I heard all these different stories from people that I was talking to. And then I went and I shared him this article, and then there's a couple of others that I have here as well. It's reported on by a website called Lifestyles, another one that's called Web Pro News. So a number of different people picked up the story and ran with it in late July and August of 2025. He's a Canadian. He's not American. He has the biggest American free speech platform, right? If you guys look now on the icon that you have for Rumble, if it's on your phone, it's an American flag. He helps run True Social for Donald Trump, apparently. He's part of a political movement that has talked about, conservatism and maybe banning pornography. And this story, written by Emily Baker White, which will be in the comments for YouTube and Rumble, it will tell you just a little bit about who this guy is. And of course, it's coming from a left-wing bent, but some of the stuff is completely worth knowing. The fact that the Heritage Foundation, which is supposed to be a right-wing organization that believes in conservatism, not necessarily the GOP at all costs, but conservatism, they're out there and they're running around on this stuff. They're talking about pornography being a problem. And this guy made some of his money getting started off by owning a company called Jokeroo, a company that owned domains of explicit websites like pornobrokers.com, lustymaids.com, and milfmansion.com for roughly a decade between 2003 and 2013. Some of this stuff is going to get a little bit explicit. I'm going to read it because, one, it's borderline hilarious that porno domain names had so much value in them. And then also like just the silly creativity and grossness of it. Some of the domains owned by Pavlovsky appear to be offline during those years when he owned them. I'm guessing that he bought them and then turned around and sold them when someone needed them. Internet Archive records show that at least one domain registered Pavlovsky, CanadianClit.com, yes, this is explicit, advertised church upskirts and nasty hidden cam pictures of naked hot college girls while Pavlovsky owned it. It appears that the advertisements leaked out to other sites that he did not own. Rumble spokesperson said this: Forbes must have a lot of time on their hands if they're writing about domain parking business, a domain parking business that Pavlovsky ran when he was 18 to 19 years old, while he was, and where advertising and were managed by third parties. So he just made money off this. He wasn't actually involved in it. It's not part of his ideology. What it does is it kind of tells you a little bit about the kind of person you're dealing with, principles wise. And that doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that he's a bad person per se, but it does mean that he's an opportunist and he's not exactly like what a lot of people would think of as being conservative. And I don't know, did they denounce it? No. That's the thing. They could be like, hey, look, this is the one thing I never see people on the political right do. The situation on the ground has changed. I have new facts, information. I found a newfound faith in God. I had a life-changing event of being married or whatever it was. And I now have different values. I have grown as a human being like many human beings have done. I think we can all accept that people change when there's a reason or an understanding why. I'll give you Tulsi Gabbard as a good example. I'm a little bit more positive on Tulsi Gabbard than I was previously. If you guys watched the show for a couple of years, you know I was very suspicious of Tulsi Gabbard. The things she said and then the change was like very opportunistic. She seemed like she was like, oh, I'm jumping off the sinking ship and I'm jumping on the one that floats. And then you have to go back and you have to read in her own words what made her change her mind. People ask me sometimes, well, did you always distrust the government? The answer is yes. Did I always know it was as bad as it was? No. You never know it's as bad as it is until it comes for you personally. So you can have a life-changing experience, like the government decides to bankrupt your family, take away your health benefits, make you sell your home, leave your kids destitute without a place to live, have to move in with family when you're in your 40s and you have children. That could be a real life-changing experience for you. You could go from having a sort of like general distrust to a very specific dislike for your federal government if that were to happen to you. And Tulsi Gabbard had kind of one of those moments where we looked at it and we were like, oh, she was spied on by her country. She had a clearance, a security clearance, and was on a domestic terrorism list. Like those things can really rattle a person. And when you start putting them into context, you go like, aha, I get it. I understand that change. What you don't see is that change from Chris Pavlovsky, at least not publicly. And so I just found these interesting. Again, there's a couple different articles. I will link them in the comments. You guys can read them. I've read them all. I don't want to spend tons of time on it other than to say not everybody is the person that they present themselves to be. So we should know them by their fruits, which is actually kind of a bacon cheeseburger nationalist position. It's kind of a Christian position, but a lot of people will do that. What? You don't have to do it in a Christian way. You can just say, first we try and then we trust. Or trust but verify. Take your pick of what that looks like. There are secular ways of saying it, for sure. It would be nice if we could just say, I'm going to evaluate you based on what you've done. Is Rumble really a free speech platform? Is it a place that goes and buys up anybody that might have some notoriety in order to try to, stop this tanking business model and hemorrhage, the hemorrhaging of the stock prices? Makes me wonder. That's all. All right, I'm going to pivot into the politics of it because I love seeing the narrative. I love seeing what's going on. And sometimes people say the quiet part out loud on accident. I subscribe to this opinion of like alternate popular or alternate statements. If Mike Johnson tells me something, tells the American people something, I'm going to set my watch by the opposite, this contrary opinion. He said we were going to get single issue appropriations bill in November of 2023. I'm not going to let that go, by the way. I'm not letting that one go. I can't. He said it. That's really what I wanted. When they vacated the speaker's chair and they got rid of Kevin McCarthy, they put in this guy, Mike Johnson. And the story was, we are going to approve government line by line, dollar amount by dollar amount, department by department. And I went, that would be great. I also have zero faith that was going to happen. In fact, for those of you that know and have been listening for a little while, I got into a Twitter discussion in verbal format. So on the X Spaces side of things. And the question was, to George Santos, who was then a member of Congress, who was cheerleading the Republican Party, as he often does. And I said, George, I'll bet you $100 that this thing does not happen, that you are not going to come back in 2 months with line item appropriations, that you're going to continue to do omnibuses and continuing resolutions and minibuses and so on. And the answer is, of course they did. And George Santos owes me $100, and I won't collect on it because I just like to be able to dunk on him whenever I talk to him, which is sometimes. That's strange. Mike Johnson said, the midterms are basically in the bag. He's very bullish on it, and they've raised the most amount of money. Don't they kind of tell you where their focus is? It's all about money and not about the actual accomplishments. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I heard.
I am very bullish on the midterms. I'm convinced, Shannon, that we're going to win. We have an extraordinary record to run on. We're raising more money than Democrats right now. I personally raised $82 million as an all-time record for a speaker last year. And when you combine that with the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is the Speaker's endorsed super PAC, I raised $218 million. The NRCC has better numbers. The RNC has better numbers. We're going to have a war chest to run on and a great record and extraordinary candidates to put out there on the field. We've got the tailwinds, and I think we're going to defy history and do this and grow our majority. I need a margin larger than 1, Shannon.
Yeah, he needs a margin larger than 1. And, it's just they've got tons of money in a war chest. So it's all about cash. That sounds really great. In other ways, you may actually have heard they've already solved all the problems. The golden era is here. And if you're not recognizing it, if your pocketbook doesn't feel that way, if you just went to Costco like I did and saw how much everything costs and realized that the coffee you bought is $6 up a bag when it used to be 12 or whatever it was, or whatever it is that you buy, or they don't even have like the butter that I like to buy because it's out, because it's not being transported or even being made, because it's being sold out, because they're completely out of Costco brand paper towels. That's a personal bugaboo. If I go there for paper towels, I really do want to find them, and they're not there. I had to buy the name brand. Yuck. Yeah, apparently you're the problem. $22 for paper towels. That's totally normal. That's what the golden era looks like, or so says members of the cabinet. Here's some knob slobbery. Donald Trump fixed all your problems, apparently.
That's how you get money down. That's how you fix the deficit. You are fixing everything with your policies. You have changed America and created the golden age. Thank you. And with the...
And with that, I'm a little uncomfortable because you said I created the golden age. Did you? Listen, we're so busy winning right now. We have no time to be messing around with these promises that were made by all kinds of campaign surrogates, like for the vice president and the son of the president and a bunch of people who said they were going to take over and release Epstein files and fix all the stuff that was going on in federal law enforcement with our FBI. Remember when that was a big deal? That was like a campaign talking point, that there were a bunch of creeps and pedophiles, elite pedophiles. And again, I don't know the answer to what's in that file system. I do have a little bit more context about how FBI investigations worked and are organized, so I can talk about that, and we're going to do it in just a second. But I do find it kind of interesting that the powers that be and the official narrative creators, the folks that are going to be pushing out whatever today's version of Rosa Parks looks like, like the Mark Levins, they're going to take Mike Johnson and they're going to give a quick little narrative, and they're going to give a quick little wrap up saying, everything you're doing is super important. Whatever people care about because that's their personal interest is not important. Stop talking about Epstein, and let's go win some midterms because the midterms are coming and they're super dangerous if we don't win. Even though a lot of Americans don't see a huge difference. Yeah, the border's closed. Great. That should have always been done. That should be a no-brainer. We're going to have a huge fight right now over whether or not sanctuary cities are a real thing. And we're going to have a fight over national sovereignty. That seems like a real problem. It's really interesting that the left has decided that because they don't control the levers of power in the federal government, the state government and the local governments are now the most powerful thing ever. They're actually turning everybody on their head. And when you see people just flip-flopping sides with no principles, just because of the team that actually is holding the ball right now, it kind of tells me everything I need to know about whether or not we're going to win anything. I did an interview with Mike Adams, who does the Health Ranger and Brighteon and some other stuff. And one of the things that we discussed, which I thought was spot on, I don't think that this rickety scaffolding can continue in the way that it does. I don't know how long it lasts. I don't want to prognosticate on, when does the United States, the constitutional republic, stop? But I don't believe that we have real elections. And I don't believe that the FBI got to the bottom of it by going and raiding a couple of warehouses 5-6 years after the fact in Fulton County, Georgia. I don't. Not even a little bit. Do you? I mean, do you? I don't think that this thing can last because everyone is being told to just move along and stop looking at the things that bother you. But that doesn't mean that everything falls apart and that we end up in a zombie apocalypse or some sort of post-apocalypse, like some Mad Max scenario. I think the answer is, amusingly, what Democrats are saying right now. 10th Amendment revolution. We start seeing that the local governments and the state governments actually have more authority and power over you, as they should. That's what's supposed to happen. Yeah, but please, whatever you do, stop asking questions about Epstein. Yeah, we just dumped out millions of files on you in a way that you can't actually suss through or actually make any sense, and the average person is never going to be able to discern. By the way, we don't actually put it out in a way that's useful. Like, the FBI does things in what's called serialized format. That means that every single file comes in a date order and the serial is a number. So each addition to the file has a number and it's sequential. So you can track the logical sort of progress. You start in the oldest ones and you move forward and you can see where an investigation has gone. And they're not going to put them out with serial numbers on them the way that the FBI would have actually seen them. No, they're just going to dump a bunch of stuff sort of sporadically, like someone took all the papers and then did what we used to be told some of our professors would do if they were too tired in college. They would just throw the papers in the air and see which step they landed on. And based on the step, they would just grade them based on the mass of papers on the step. That's kind of what it seems like the FBI did with this data dump. They make it in the most unfunctional way. And I can't even say that that's necessarily on purpose. It might just be a little clue to you on how inefficient and useless our federal government generally is, like even at data handling or trying to drop something out when they spent hundreds of thousands of man hours on it. Here's Mark Levin telling you that doesn't matter. Just stop.
Among these new files.
That is not Mark Levin. This is Mark Levin.
We better be united. We better be strong. We better be focused. We better be articulate. We can't waste our time on Epstein and other stuff that are going on here that some people want us to focus on. I've about had it with all that stuff. We better focus on who we are, what we're doing, where we want to take the country, and what they want to do to the country. Mr. Speaker, God bless you, my friend. I appreciate you very, very much.
You too, Mark. Thanks for all you do. God bless.
Yeah, I like it. It froze with his finger up in the air, pointing at you. He was about to lecture us. Here's kind of what I see there. There's this logical fallacy known as the false dichotomy. The false dichotomy is that it's either this or that. Either we get Republicans who run things and do their agenda, or we get Democrats and they destroy us, or whatever the heck they're trying to sell. And then there's people who just go like, I'm not really on your team. I don't really have any sort of investment in your process. And it seems like everything you're doing is a lie. It seems like you're curating a narrative for me, and I don't believe you. You've proven yourself to be untrustworthy in other things you've said. I can hold you accountable to words that come out of your mouth hole. I don't have to even go back that far. It's strange enough to see that both sides apparently want to treat every person that's going to listen to them like the audience has the memory of a goldfish. And I guess the scariest part of it for me is a lot of the audience has the memory of a goldfish. You don't even remember what someone told you a few minutes ago about what they were going to do or what they believed or what their values were. And then you just take them at their face value today because I like the way you said it. It sounded good. You were super confident. And yeah, that's what I'm into. This is my guy. Doesn't matter that he's done a 180 on the things that he was talking about. Very briefly, if you guys are listening to us on Rumble, make sure you got a backup play to listen to us just in case. You can support us over on Locals. That's also a Rumble platform, by the way. And you can support us on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin to get to the main channel there. Subscribe, notify if you guys want to watch it without any of the extra ads from YouTube. You got to watch us at 0930 Eastern time. Give us a like regardless of where you're at. Appreciate that. And you may hear an ad from the audio platforms right now. If you want to see video too on those audios, boom, go to Spotify. It's KyleSeraphinShow.com. We are trending on there on a regular basis. We are gaining followers. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you're listening. Every time I get this, I get this little notification from Spotify telling me that if we were a channel that was not being suppressed, that we would have something like 60% more followers on that space, whatever. If you guys want to join us there, I'd appreciate it. Subscribe to the place, like, share, etc. If you want to help the show grow, if you want to do the easiest thing you could do, you can support our sponsors and you can simply just send it to a friend. As we grow audience, we grow reach, and that insulates us against some of the weird stuff that's going on. All right. Let's do some talking about Epstein stuff, shall we? We do want to do Epstein first? Yes, let's do Epstein. Here's Todd Blanche giving actually really important context. A lot of people want to bag on Todd Blanche. I don't feel strongly about him one way or another. I don't know the guy. I didn't work with the guy. So I can look at him and just go, sometimes he's saying things that are true. Sometimes he's saying things that are false. Sometimes he's saying things that are clearly just government narrative slop, and I'm not going to eat it. Here he is talking on CNN about, I think, important context. A lot of the stuff they just released is not credible information. And they did that, I suspect, on purpose, because they were like, we're going to give you everything. And then you go try to figure out what is what. And most of you don't actually have the background on it. Most people will never have the background on it because they don't actually know what it is they're even reading. They're just seeing names and words, and then it's very salacious, so they get excited. Let's do a little bit of context.
Among these new files is a list compiled by the FBI just in August of numerous salacious and, to be really clear, unverified allegations about President Trump. Why did the FBI create this list last year, and have all of these claims been investigated by the DOJ?
So look, it's not about President Trump. It's about a ton of people, multiple people that were, quote, in the Epstein files. And what I think folks will see when they review the materials we released is that there have been hundreds of calls made to the FBI where allegations are made by either anonymous individuals or people who are very quickly determined to not be credible, whether it's the nature of what they're saying or the fact they won't provide any information or corroboration. And that's part of the Epstein files. So go ahead.
I understand that. But the fact that you created a list, the FBI created a list about the allegations against President Trump, it is certainly noteworthy. I mean, he's a sitting president. And the question is whether or not the DOJ, but the question is, and I'm not saying that they're verified at all, and that's what my question is to you. Did you look into what you have on those lists?
Yes, of course, but what you're not being fair in that question, because that index, that list you're talking about, was not just President Trump. It was all kinds of individuals, other politicians, other, quote, famous people, where we wanted to understand, okay, there were members of Congress that were accusing us of hiding things, which we're not doing and which we haven't done. And so we wanted to understand why and where that was coming from. And it turns out there was a number of claims made by either, like I said, anonymous people or somebody, for example, calling and saying, I used to have a roommate who told me this sensational story. So just, obviously that's not something that can be really investigated, right? What's your roommate's name? I don't remember. Right. So that's what that's about. I don't appreciate it being directed towards Donald J. Trump, because that pushes a narrative that is completely false. There are all kinds of people that are mentioned in the quote Epstein files that we had to look at and run down.
Yeah.
That's actually not an unfair take for whatever it's worth. I do think the CNN's being a little bit, they're being a little bit disingenuous. Obviously, she's pushing this narrative. Here's the New York Times headline on this. I'll scroll up real quick so you guys can see it if you're watching. This is from their newsletter, Deal Book. Major business names in the Epstein files. Documents feature or reference prominent executives like Elon Musk, Howard Lutnick, who just said that Trump is in the golden age. Bill Gates underscored a wide web of bold-faced names that are tied to Jeffrey Epstein. And there's probably like 8 or 10 different people, I guess 8 people here in the byline talking about what's going on. All right. So let's kind of talk about what this does and what it doesn't do. Some of the stuff that's in there are emails. And the emails, I would say, are interesting, and they are firsthand source material, and they are without context, but we can try to put them into context and understand what they mean. So that's, I think, maybe the value part. A lot of the stuff you see are agent comments and emails back and forth inside the FBI internally that came from somebody at NTalk. We've talked about it here. It's been something discussed. NTalk is the National either Threat Operations Center or Tactical Operations Center. I don't know exactly what the T part stands for. It doesn't really matter. It's a call center in West Virginia where you can call like 1-800-TIPS or whatever the heck the FBI tips line is. You call them in and you give information completely anonymously. And you can talk about anything you want. And they'll write it down. And they will do a trace and try to figure out where you're at. Or if you send them an email to the FBI tips line online, then you'll get whatever the hell that looks like. And they will try to vet it. And they get hundreds of thousands of crazy people let's call it a week. It's really worse than that. During January 6th, it was way worse than that. They were getting hundreds of thousands a day of just insane stuff. They would say, you, whoever you are listening to this podcast, they'd say, like I knew that person back when we were in high school and he was a real a-hole and I didn't much care for the way that he liked Ronald Reagan. He thought Jimmy Carter was lousy and I thought Jimmy Carter was great. And I bet he loves Donald Trump. I haven't seen him in 35 years. But he was probably at January 6th. You should go arrest him. That's the kind of crap that comes into NTalk. It's the reason why a lot of people who are J6ers were in fact found and attacked. So I can't help but see the parallel that people don't even recognize what's coming in over there is garbage. We would get phone calls every single day. I mean, guys, if I could show you my email, and one day I may do something where we just do a bunch of screenshots. I have somebody that emails me, full email, okay, with a sentence that is the headline. It's the title of the email. And then a sentence that continues as the body and sends me 1 to 2 minutes apart for like 12 hours a day. Totally crazy, 100% mentally ill people. I have at least a dozen people blocked on my public email that send me long lists that are dozens and dozens of pages long of crazy shit. Just the absolute weirdest things you've ever read. Their suppositions, their beliefs, the fact that somebody is running their brain and that the CIA is running the people that are running their brain. And so they're not even in control of themselves. So it starts off with an apology on behalf of the handlers of the people that are writing the email. I get crazy stuff. And the FBI gets way crazier stuff than that. So anything that says NTalk, and as Todd Blanche was, I think, appropriately pointing out, this person was at this bank. I mean, mentally ill people are very, very specific. If you've ever dealt with this particular group, they fixate on strange things. They grab details of something they saw, and it sounds somewhat credible right until you look into it. I'm reminded of working in the emergency room when we had a psych case come in, and the guy came in, and he told us that he had radiation burns. And he seemed totally credible. And was very sane sounding. He was dressed like a regular person. His clothes were on. He wasn't all crazy, like homeless looking. And he walked in and he said, I have radiation burns. And it was like, oh, okay, well, where? They're like, they were on my feet. And so like, you can't immediately tell whether that's true or not. And I went like, oh, okay, we got to get you into a room. And maybe we need to do some sort of like isolation protocol here. We took him into the room. We sat him down. And then the guy goes, I go, well, what's going on? And he was like, well, I have an implant that's leaking. And there are some implants that actually have radiation involved. And they're, some sort of like cancer insert or something. I don't know. So you start asking more questions. And I go, well, when did you get this implant? And he's like, well, I don't know. That's red flag number 1. And you're like, well, who put it in there? And he's like, the CIA put it in there. And you're like, oh, shit, you're a crazy person. The CIA took a random guy off the street who otherwise doesn't look crazy and did a radiation insert in your body that is now leaking. And now you have burns. I used to get crazies like that all the time on the ambulance. I'd get them all the time in the ER. You get them all the time when you work in the FBI. The number of crazy people that I saw in like some of the highlights that were over on X and some of the social media posts of like, can you believe this thing happened? Look, this bank in Richmond has a secret wall with a faucet behind it that has the word like, Randy on it or Gabe. And that's how you know that's where the pedophiles are. And you're just going like, good God, people, have a little bit of sense. That yes, a lot of people who are famous get fixations. I am not famous. And there are a number of people that have fixated just on me because I worked at the FBI. And that means that they can come after me. I also have been on Alex Jones's program. And there's a bunch of crazy people that are on Alex Jones' watching list. And they watch it and they think that Alex is talking directly into their brain. So allow it to be said that there are plenty of people with mental illness. And those files are going to be filled with that and things that are legit. There are some real things that are out there that are kind of unsettling. And there's some baked in assumptions that we're all looking at. The assumptions is that there are pedophiles who did terrible things to women who were underage, young women who were underage. And then they got away with it. And there's a decent chance that that's true. But we don't necessarily have proof of that simply because someone showed up in an NTalk email or a random complaint, or as Todd Blanche said, some anonymized garbage. And so I will continue to maintain, because we don't have transparency. And by the way, it'd be nice if the case agents who actually worked on this, who have a solid grasp and have been doing it for a decade and know all the ins and outs of those serials and how they got put together and what seems legit, what seems like it's BS, and like what was just, garbage that they're flooding the market with, and what was actually sort of the structure or the bones of what they were building. Remember, They arrested Jeffrey Epstein again. He died in a prison cell or a jail cell because they were charging him, and his co-conspirator was also supposedly involved in trafficking young women, and she's doing prison time for it, Ghislaine Maxwell. So something happened, and it goes the spectrum from two people were real creeps and they preyed on young girls because they had money, to the far, worst case scenario is that an elite ring of pedophiles were trafficking in young girls to blackmail and exploit world leaders all over the globe. And I don't know where it sits in there. It probably sits closer to this side, which was like two people were creeps and doing creepy stuff. Maybe with some other really rich people. Yes, he had a ranch. Yes, he had an island. All of those things are not common for us. So it lets our imaginations run wild. But just because it appears on those files doesn't mean it's legit. It also is troubling when someone starts telling you that we can't listen to it and we can't talk about it. And Mark Levin is giving us the information. Stop it. We're done with you. Todd Blanche says this and talks about that built-in assumption. They've already told you they're not going to prosecute anybody. So that may be the worst thing that people hear because it's only going to keep spinning. And the answers are not sufficient to the number of questions that people have.
You said this is the end of the Epstein, of your review of the Epstein files. So just to clarify, is the public going to learn the identities of the men who abused the girls with the information that you're releasing? And if not, why not? And then I have a quick follow-up.
I mean, you just baked in an assumption into your question that I have never said and I don't know to be true. Is the public going to learn about men that abuse these girls? Like, what does that mean? I mean, I don't understand what that means.
Well, I mean, they're the men who abused the young women through Epstein's,
Look, we said in July, and it remains as true today as it was in July. If we had information, we meaning the Department of Justice, about men who abused women, we would prosecute them, right? We talked about the work that we're doing. That's why I said that. I said this earlier. There's this built-in assumption that somehow there's this hidden tranche of information of men that we know about that we're covering up or that we're choosing not to prosecute. That is not the case. I don't know whether there are men out there that abuse these women. If we learn about information and evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But I don't think that the public or you all are going to uncover men within the Epstein files that abuse women, unfortunately.
What does he mean by unfortunately? Unfortunately, because he can't give an answer to that question. By the way, Todd Blanche is an infinitely better purveyor of that message than Kash Patel is, who sounds like a liar on his face. Todd Blanche appears to be somewhat genuine. Maybe he's a better actor. I don't know. Here's the New York Times story, and they mention some of the names that appear in there. Who would appear in the Justice Department Epstein files has for months been the source of speculation among prominent names in the world, in business and politics and academia and so on. The department's enormous file release related to Jeffrey Epstein on Friday, of course it was done on Friday, where they dump all this stuff out on you and they dump it so that you can just try to suss through it on the weekend. They hope the story dies. What has emerged so far has been a wide web of bold-faced names tied to the disgraced financier and the convicted sex offender. So let's go through a couple of them real quick. You guys can read this whole article if you're so inclined. Bill Gates talking about potentially an extramarital affair. Elon Musk, who supposedly didn't go to the island or was invited, something to that effect. There's just a whole bunch in here. There's just too much to actually parse through, which I think is what the whole point is. Howard Lutnick, who we talked about earlier. Mark Rowan, who was from the Apollo Global Management co-founding, weighed in on buying a private jet, apparently. I'm sorry, he didn't do the Apollo Global. He was talking about buying a private jet. Brad Karp, prominent lawyer. Kevin Warsh. Some of these people, and this is the question that people have always had. Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google. Steve Tisch owns the New York Giants or co-owns it. So the question has always been like, well, why did the victims come forward and just name who they were? Like, how many of you people have a picture of those faces of the names I just said to you? Because I have a picture of a couple of them, only because they appear in the news on a regular basis. But I have no idea what Brad Karp looks like, prominent attorney. Or Mark Rowan. I don't know what he looks like. I don't know what Kevin Warsh. I don't even know what Sergey Brin looks like. And I've seen pictures of him a lot because I cover things like Google and censorship. I don't know what these people look like. So the question has always been is like, how come the women haven't come out and named who they were? Maybe they don't know. That's actually the job of an investigator. But then again, I don't know that Todd Blanche is wrong. I just know that there's a bunch of names in there and it sounds like they were sort of involved with this and they did shady stuff to include like, I don't know, Bill Gates, which may be the funniest story in the whole thing. here's one of the victims being brought on CNN. And they call themselves survivors, so I'll call them survivors. But I don't know what that even means and what exactly their story is. So each one of them, you never hear, like, the most important part of the story is, what did you go through? Where did you experience? When did it happen? What parts do you remember? What have you shared with law enforcement? I never actually hear these stories. I get these little like snippets from them, and they come on for a 2-minute Fox hit or a 2-minute hit on CNN. And we actually are getting less information. It's actually less judicious than actually hearing long form some of the stories. And then even then, it's like, well, if you were a teenager, how many of you actually have really good, great, accurate, crystal clear memories of things that happened, especially bad things, when you're a teenager? One of the worst things you can get is eyewitness testimony, for whatever it's worth. Our belief is that there was video of all this stuff. Apparently, we're not going to get that.
I actually brought a little show and tell for you, Caitlin. You know how I heard you speaking with the attorney before this about the 302s. And this is what the only 302 that could be found so far in the files by someone that was combing the files for hours. It was 7 pages, and 4 of them looked like this. So we know that the victim's name is here, right? And that's appropriately redacted. So what is all of this? So there's no way for me to say to you that there's closure here. This is the exact opposite of transparency.
I mean, it must be so frustrating for you to look at that and to see just completely blacked out in the entire page.
And then we've seen pages where they're blacked out and the only thing not blacked out was a survivor's name. It is such incompetence. It is sloppy. I mean, if any one of us did our jobs the way the DOJ did this job, we wouldn't be working humans. We would lose our job. We would lose our place in a company because this particular job has been so egregiously done. Horrific.
That might be the most insightful thing that you're going to hear in that interview. The people doing this work probably meant well. The systems they're working on are not designed to do what they did. And then you just had like this data dump, which the federal government doesn't do on a general basis. Like, don't actually go out there and present things like, here's what we found, here's how we do it. This is the way that we're going to lay this thing out for you so the American people come out and understand it. You're talking about an intelligence agency. I feel like this is the thing that I started saying. My first interview I ever did, which goes back to September of 2022. The first thing I said was, people look at the FBI and they see a law enforcement agency. And those who know better look at it and see an intelligence agency. It's been an ongoing supposition that that fundamental disconnect in reality has caused so much grief for people on the right. Now people on the left are seeing it. They're suddenly outraged about it, that they're going after certain people, that they have an agenda, a targeted agenda, and then they go out and execute it. Intelligence agencies do not go out there and try to seek clarity or giving you opportunity to have, they give you 4 pages of redacted nonsense. And they say, they take Steve Friend's book, our regular Friendly Friday contributor. They take Steve Friend's book and they say, yes, we're willing to approve you publishing this book, but we've redacted 40 pages of the 180 pages that you wrote. 40 full pages. And by the way, those are the entire transcripts of actual conversations that you have recordings of with somebody who was likely involved in violating state and federal law. That's what we want to redact. Transparency doesn't just mean things we like. In theory, it means the uncomfortable truth, the accuracy that's going to be cutting in some ugly way, and we may have to go out there and tell you to take it with a grain of salt because there's information that's involved. And plenty of people will read things that are unredacted and they will run with it. And they will act like they have some nugget of knowledge when they don't actually have context. They'll read that something came into NTalk and they'll think that that is God's honest truth because they don't know what NTalk is. Or there'll be a lady who used to be a Monsanto shill, who used to spend all of her time pumping like agribusinesses because her husband may or may not own like the largest lobbying firm in Illinois. I'm talking about Julie Kelly here, who's a proxy for the Dan Bongino show, and who decided to pick a fight with me over something she didn't understand. This is common everywhere. If you get novel information and your take on it is, I now understand this because I now have this little tiny nugget that I don't have any context for, you're a fool. That's why I don't get along with Dan Bongino, apparently, because his buddy Julie Kelly, decided that having the inclusion of the deadly force policy on some paperwork where it's pre-printed, by the way, and it's been there since the 1990s on every single operation the FBI's ever done. Some of those operations were really bad, by the way, guys. They did this after Ruby Ridge. They did this after they went after the folks in Waco. When they went up and they showed up on scene from the 90s on, every single FD 888 paperwork had this little pre-filled in section, which was the FBI's deadly force policy, which is almost the same as the deadly force policy that we're now talking about with ICE in Minnesota. It turns out they're just out there. It's not novel. It's not new. It doesn't mean that you're authorized to kill people. It doesn't mean that at all, in fact. But if you don't know anything, if you don't have any context, if you think that NTalk is God's honest truth, and that means that this name is in the Epstein files now because it was actually part of a file that was in the computer, but they didn't actually give it to you. The funniest thing is the government's disorganized process should be the one thing that everybody recognizes and goes like, oh, got it. Our government sucks at transparency. Our government sucks at telling us the truth, and that allows people to play within the margins of all this weird stuff. Another victim, and then we'll do Epstein in his own words, because he was apparently interviewed by Steve Bannon, and there's hours and hours of footage of it, and that just came out over the weekend, because it's just been an overload. If we could just give you all the stuff right now, it's like a Band-Aid rip. Very interesting that it all happened over this weekend. One more victim talking over on CNN again.
But then he also talked about victims, and that he wants you to have an opportunity to speak to them, that's what this is about. I wanted to play explicitly what he said to give you a chance to respond directly. Here he is.
Any victim that wants to speak with the department has done so, hopefully. If not, they should. The prosecutors from this case in New York have given hundreds, if not thousands of hours to working with victims. And that's what we do every day. And that's what we did in this case as well.
It's such a farce. It is just, it makes me so viscerally angry, to respond to that, because we as survivors, so many of us have been begging and asking to speak to the DOJ. I know a survivor who wrote a letter to Todd Blanche, and we have never heard anything. So as far as our survivor community goes, and we're about 15 to 20, I don't know a single survivor that has spoken to DOJ.
So when he says any victim that wants to speak with the department has done so, and that they spent hundreds of thousands of hours, you're just calling that out.
It is not honest. And so once again, we are it's not just even the lack of transparency. It's like we're covering it all up all the time.
Our chat's calling out a question. She's angry. She's viscerally angry. And yet she's smiling and she seems to be chuckling. Now, there are all kinds of reactions that people have to frustration, especially stuff that they've internalized and they've held on to for a long time. I will regularly call out things that happen in our experience with the federal government, my family's experience with the FBI, and I can do it in a funny way. It's usually pretty biting and sarcastic, to be fair. It's usually not like some friendly thing. It usually has kind of a hard edge to it. But I don't know what she was saying there. She said that there's 15 or 20 survivors in her circle and nobody has talked to the FBI. I also would love to know what efforts they made to do that. The FBI doesn't just seek you out and find you per se, although they might. Isn't it strange when people act in a specific way that is the exact opposite of what we'd expect? There has to be a reason for it. The reason can be any number of things. And again, I don't have the context to know. I don't know whether she's gone through the crying phase of it and now she's in the whole world is a comedy and a farce and I'm just laughing because we're living in a clown world. That may be the case. It might be. But to assume that we know the story and then putting out there for a 3-minute hit on CNN and telling a quick version of it, why have you not spoken to DOJ? What efforts have you had that were frustrated? What was your actual story? I'm sure some of this stuff is available, but this is something I found in my own story. You go out there and you expect people to know a little bit about you because you lived through something crazy. And I regularly will meet people who have absolutely no idea some of the things that our federal government has done in the last 5 years. No idea. People that are conservative, people that consume news media passively or not at all, and they just sort of they're just cruising through the world, not knowing what's happening in their government. They're randomly voting for a team that says GOP or voting for the other side because it's the Democrats and that's their team. And they don't know what either side has done, what either side has promised. A lot of people don't know this stuff. So I can't be completely I have more empathy for these people having been in a very different scenario where you bring forward a public and then people ask you like, well, so who are you and what did you do and why does it matter to me? Okay. All I want to know is I don't just want the story you're selling. I do want the background story. I do want the context like we just got in the Rosa Parks scenario. I do want to know that you were selected to do this thing. Shouldn't that be part of it? Let's have a full disclosure. Let's have an honest conversation. What's out there? Let's have more of like why this happened and why Steve Bannon is doing kind of this softball interview with this guy. This is a little clip of it where he's talking about the devil. This is Jeffrey Epstein, speaking from beyond the grave, I guess, right here, talking about his who he is, and he seems completely uninterested and not worried, and it doesn't seem like he has any remorse when he starts talking about his delineation as a sexual predator.
What are you, class 3 sexual predator?
Tier 1.
What's tier 1's the highest and worst?
No, I'm the lowest. I'm the lowest. Your child's life.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question.
I'm sorry.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Because you have all the attributes. You're incredibly smart. You remember the devil is somebody knows
smart?
The devil's brilliant. You read Milton's Paradise Lost.
No, the devil scares me.
Satan is at the number 1 or 2 archangel, and the reason he goes to hell and leads the rebellion is because he can't be the top guy. And his thing is, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven.
I saw that in a movie.
I also don't care about the Epstein information. I don't care about those files. I think it's irrelevant. I don't care about those files. I think it's irrelevant. I think it's irrelevant. No one is going to be charged. Everyone got away with it. No one is going to be charged. Everyone got away with it. And I would much rather dig into January 6th. Much rather dig into.
Like that. You've got to get no.
I just have never cared about it personally.
Because in the files you're going to find out the I know, but but I'm saying it's you'll get to the cover up of exactly what the cover-up was. They're even admitting they got these tapes and things. This is Cash and Pam. You got to get it. Once you get into these things, they're rich. As you know, Julie, you've done it yourself with no resource at all, just doing it yourself. You understand as you start these investigations, every day you tell me, hey, I found this. The process itself delivers. Once you have intention and start moving down.
Kind of interesting. Steve Bannon talking to Julie Kelly. That was in July of 2025. So I will give you the context that was right about the time when they had the memo released that Todd Blanche came out and said was signed off on, even though their names are not on it, by Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and himself. And then it wasn't a Pam Bondi thing. So Bannon's name is mentioned in there quite a bit. And Bannon apparently spent some time with this guy. And there he is talking about there's more to come. So what is he doing? And these are questions I don't have the answers to. Like I said, some of the stuff is more transparent than not, because we can look in to see things and read the actual email chains behind them. And you go, okay, well, that actually is substance. These are 2 people. That's a factual event. And if we can put it in context, then maybe we would know more about it. And I'm confident the people who did the FBI investigation would. I'm going to ask you guys real quickly, if you would, if you're watching over on Rumble, it sounds like some people are having some issues on the platform. Shocker. Give us a thumbs up if you're able to. Same story over on YouTube. I've had people tell me they can't actually like the videos on Rumble when they do it. It won't show anything. Hit it anyway. Do what you can. Subscribe on YouTube and on Locals, and subscribe over on Rumble if you like. You can follow us on X. And lastly, find us on Spotify at KyleSeraphinShow.com. You may hear a Spotify ad right now. If you guys share it with a friend, we'd appreciate that. That's all really fun. I've got a couple of like lighthearted takes on this stuff because it is pretty heavy. I don't know what else you would do when you look at this. Here is, here's the artist formerly known as Jess doing what he does, which is breaking things down that are borderline hilarious, I think. And he's going to talk about maybe the funniest sort of realization coming out of the file so far that we have is emails going back and forth between Epstein and Bill Gates. And this is pretty gross.
I think we should all take a minute and truly appreciate how fucking pathetic Bill Gates is. So in the Epstein files there, he contracted an STD from some Russian girls that Jeffrey Epstein supplied him. And then Bill Gates started emailing Jeffrey, complaining to him about his STDs and describing his tiny little penis and what was wrong with it. And then Jeffrey had to explain to him that he had STDs. Then he had to get Bill Gates some antibiotics for that. And in that process, Bill Gates gave the STD to his wife, Melinda, And then Bill Gates starts emailing Jeffrey Epstein about how he can slip the antibiotics to his wife without her knowing. Like, I can say, like, I've never had to fucking try to drug my wife. Like, I am not that. What a piece of shit. Like, what a sad, pathetic piece of shit Bill Gates is. Because it gets even funnier than that, right? Like, Epstein loved playing Xbox Live and playing Call of Duty and shit. The dude was a gamer. Like, was playing World of Warcraft and shit, right? So Bill Gates annoys the fuck out of Jeffrey. Like, he's like, you gotta help me slip Melinda these fucking antibiotics. And Jeffrey's like, you're fucking annoying the fuck out of me. He's like, get the fuck out of here. And so, like, they have a rift over this shit. And he's like, stop fucking calling me. And, like, Jeffrey Epstein's like, fuck off, Bill Gates. So what does Bill Gates do? Deletes fucking Jeffrey Epstein's Xbox Live account, kicks him off. Bill Gates kicked Jeffrey Epstein off Xbox Live because he fucking wouldn't help him slip his wife antibiotics. That's some funny shit. Bill Gates, you are truly a epic level piece of shit. Makes you wonder, like, was Bill Gates pushing the 2020 vax? Like, that was his under the ground covert way to slip his wife some fucking STD medication. I think that's a possibility that we should probably investigate a little more.
It always comes back to COVID. It always comes back to COVID for some reason. It actually leads me back to where I would go with this discussion, which is that in light of the opening segment, talking about Rosa Parks and the missing context that I think is relevant to looking at this story and her story and that time, and how many people became distrustful of what our federal government was willing to do and the illogical things that were being posted, whether it be the death counter where they were actually pretending like they could count the number of people that died from COVID in real time, and CNN and Fox and all these other sort of scare tactics, to the number of ridiculous statements about whether or not natural immunity worked and whether or not that stuff was actually available and whether it was going to do anything that it was supposed to do, like it's done with every other disease and virus that anyone's ever contracted ever. So that's kind of where I go. People took a divergent path after those things happened. A lot of people, my age, some of you that are older than me, we went into this moment where we went, okay, they're willing to lie to us and they're not even trying to make it sound plausible or credible. At least the Rosa Parks story was pretty well concocted. It was a pretty good op as far as things go. And so the story is believable, and the basics of it were things that were factually accurate. She may have had to shop around to get the right bus driver, but it actually did happen to her, at least in some version of what they were trying to sell. People have gone two routes since 2020, 2021, when the forced vaccine mandates came down. One route was, I don't believe anybody on faith. Just trust me, bro, is dead. And so you've got to produce evidence that I can evaluate and make my own skeptical analysis of. I am going to look at you and say, I want you to give me the facts. You can give me your opinion, and then I'll decide whether or not I agree. That's my camp. I have facts. I have opinions. I will do my best to tell you. Sometimes you should be able to tell when I'm giving you my opinion. Sometimes I'm just going to give you information. But that's the place where I think a safe consumer in this media environment lives. And then there's the other side. And those people are scary. What they said is, I just believe whatever I want. If they're just going to lie to me, I can lie to me just as well as they can lie to me. So I'll just believe whatever I want. And some of them have just picked a side. And they're like, I've outsourced my opinion to Mike Johnson. I've outsourced my opinion to Mark Levine. I've outsourced my opinion. Whatever Dan Bongino says is good for me. Whatever Ben Shapiro says that's what I say. That's what I believe. Whatever Donald Trump states at any moment, which may or may not agree with his previous statements, that's my actual opinion. I'm just going to peg myself to this person because that person is crushing it. And so I feel good about the way they said. They make me feel good. And so their opinion is just my opinion with their voice. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of people that have gone that route. They've gone that route, and they are not a single bit sort of curious, skeptical. They have no natural instinct to try to suss out truth. They just go, whatever's good. Doesn't matter how much you lie to me. One of these great examples is the recent story of Ryan Wedding. He was apparently a drug kingpin, from a pro snowboarder to a drug kingpin. And there are dueling and conflicting narratives of what happened. And we got some of this over the weekend. My guys in my group chat are trying to figure out what the hell's going on here. Mexico's president pushed back on the FBI director when he said that they basically sent in like a hit team to grab him and that they did this like high risk operation to drag him in. I tend to believe the president, this is a really sad moment. I tend to believe the president of Mexico telling me the truth more than the FBI director, because the FBI director has personally lied to me too many times. And he's lied to you. And he's done it under oath when he was out there getting confirmed. He claimed he didn't know Stu Peters. He claimed that Epstein trafficked to no one, when it's pretty clear that at least some people were involved in whatever that trafficking operation looked like, even if we can't get the names. Like, if you prove yourself under oath to be dishonest, then why on earth would we take you at your word? And still, some people do, and they cheer it on. And that's bizarre. I mean, it really is bizarre. There's a number of people that have been doing this. Here's Patel saying something else. First of all, just so you guys understand, that the two possibilities is that the FBI negotiated a normal release and surrender, which is what the Mexican president said, that there was a close relationship between the two. Usually what happens is the State Department gets involved. They work out what's called a PAW, provisional arrest warrant. The provisional arrest warrant allows the local authorities to use a U.S. warrant to go and bring that person into custody. Sometimes our people are there, but they don't have legal authority, and then they take custody of. They put them on usually the FBI jet, and then they fly them back into the U.S., and then they face whatever, indictments and so on. They go in front of a judge, and they get their initial appearance, and then they move on through the justice system. The Mexican president said, quote, "We're never going to accept joint operations or operations by U.S. federal or state forces in our territory. If we collaborate, then we just give them information, and they give us information. But the operations in our territory are Mexican forces. That must be very clear." In other words, it seemed like Patel was indicating that the HRT guys went in there and did like a snatch and grab, like an extraordinary rendition. And I don't know if that happened or not, but I did see the video of Ryan Wedding, who's apparently this drug kingpin, saying that he was going to surrender himself. And then I heard the FBI director claim that he was doing something more exciting. I don't know. He was trying to be like his own little like mini Donald Trump, doing his own little Maduro rendition. Very weird. Here he is on Fox, kind of doing what he does. A little bit of knob slobbery, a little bit of claiming of great stuff. Again, we should look at these things real clearly and just say, if you're willing to lie to us, we should be skeptics. We should ask real questions.
One of the things that we are doing is highlighting the work we've done to protect our children. Just this past year alone under President Trump's leadership, we have found and identified 6.
We're 8 seconds into this. He's already gotten a sniff and a knob slob in. Just so you guys know. That's how tight these things are.
6,000 missing kids. That's up 22%.
Another quick question. 6,000 missing kids. That's up 22%. Does anyone know who the missing kids are? Where the missing kids are? Have we ever seen any of the missing kids? Can you imagine that the FBI director, who's so thirsty for positive publicity, wouldn't do posing with those missing kids? Like got them all together at the Hoover building and was like, look, these are all the kids we found. Yay, we blurred their faces out, but look how many they're kids. What does that even mean? And the funny part of it is words like locate and disrupt and dismantle and recover. Those are all words that are FBI words that don't mean what you think they mean. I don't even know what they mean. I don't know what recover is actually indicating, but I know it's not what you think it is, because those are statistics. And the FBI categorizes things in ways that they can actually sort of like fluff up their appearance to Congress. So when they say that they have disrupted a terrorist organization, it might mean that they bought a gun from a guy who they think is a terrorist and is not actually. That they were going to sell a terrorist a gun and then they took the gun from him. That could be a disruption. It's not what you think it is. So another moment of these, like, where's our skepticism? They're presenting a narrative. It sounds seriously good. There's so much back end that people need to be skeptical of. And again, everything that we see for the last 80 years is proving it the more that it comes out.
If arrested, the FBI, 1,700 top child predators. That's up 10%. And the following is maybe some of the most impressive work the FBI is.
So they got 170 more child predators last year than they did the year before because they focused on it and they acted like they did something new. A 10% increase is like, great. I'm glad. But that just tells you the FBI does that all the time. They regularly do this. To increase your numbers by 10% is decent. It's better than what Rumble stock is doing. But it doesn't mean that you've done some extraordinary change of focus, does it? It means maybe you have more efficiency, or maybe you put a little bit more money behind it, or maybe you're actually out there just pushing your numbers a little more aggressively. And maybe, unfortunately, as we found out because Steve Friend was out there in the world talking about it, Maybe they fudged those numbers and they just took credit for more local police arrests.
You are very familiar with the nihilistic, violent extremist community online, preying on our kids, forcing them to maim and mutilate themselves, and even sometimes commit suicide.
Who are these our kids, by the way? Cash has no kids. Sounds like a Biden thing.
We are up 490% in the number of FBI arrests for the NVE community, and specifically that 764 network that targets our children. We're up over 30% in arrests related to the 764 network.
Wow.
And
Wow. Here's the crazy part about that, which we've talked about here before. All those people, all those like young men that are involved in these quote unquote networks, which are not really networks, but they don't really explain it. All of those people were young. They were underage. And so no United States attorney would take on their cases when they were juveniles. Period. The end. They would not touch them. That's why that there was never any big cases behind them. And now they're up 30%. That means if they previously arrested 6 of them, now they got 8 of them. They're 30% up. Does that make you guys feel really impressive? A 30% increase because a couple of people hit 18 or 19 years old and now they're actually eligible for federal prosecution? Again, the context matters. Or you could just say 490% up in this one thing that we just made up and 6,000 recoveries, even though we can't show you any of them. We don't even know what that means. It's relevant. This is how people lie to you to your face. And again, if you're not a skeptic, you're just going to sit there and you're just going to listen and go, oh, those sound really, really good. What do they always say? Figures lie and cash figures. Oh, maybe that's just my friends say that.
credit goes to the interagency and the men and women in the FBI working together with DOJ to bring these perpetrators to justice.
Okay. You know what the one thing we didn't see was? Where are those deep state arrests? Didn't that guy go in there and write a book about government gangsters? Weren't we expecting, this is like something that's going to be adjudicated for the midterms, for whatever it's worth. This goes back to the beginning. Again, narrative, midterms, Mike Johnson raised the most amount of money. They have the best field and candidate and so on. Dan Bongino has made his way back into the podcast thing so he could help, champion this midterm scenario. Why? What have they done? Who have they grabbed? They arrested Jim Comey and then Jim Comey got away because the DOJ is still the DOJ and didn't do it right. They got John Bolton's mustache. We did a whole podcast, a couple of them on that. Is that what you wanted for accountability? Do we have any answers about what happened during COVID? Do we have any answers what happened in the 2020 election? Do we have any answers after a year of work? Do we feel good about the big cases that they were out there pushing? Do we know who put cocaine in the White House when Biden was there? Do we know who leaked the Dobbs decision? Those were Dan Bongino priorities. We've got this guy who did the pipe bomber case, allegedly. And apparently, while this was all going on, Dan, deputy director, and the reason we mention him, he was the deputy director of the FBI. He was the chief operating officer of the agency that most of us looked out there in the last, let's say, 5 years and thought, if something is going to come get us, this is the organization that's going to get us. Do you know how I know? They went after January 6th journalists, did they not? They went after Steve Baker. They went after Sean Witzman. They went after J.D. Rivera. I've interviewed all these guys. They went after Owen Schroyer. I'm friendly with Owen. They went after Stephen Horn. They went after journalist after journalist after journalist. They completely ignored the fact that these guys were not acting as agitators or protesters or even doing anything that was illegal in any way, shape, or form, except physically in a place where they were covering the news story, and it's generally accepted that you can go and do that. So they arrested them. And the same exact agents that ran that stuff down are the ones that carried out arresting Don Lemon. And are going to go after Antifa, and are going to go out there and get the nihilistic violent extremists, or they're going to go out there and get the anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists who used to be MAGA, but now they're Antifa people. Now they're on the left because there is no principle that is guiding these people. They are all willing to do the thing that they said. They would just go out there and they'll follow orders. Their loyalties to the FBI. It's not to the president. It's not to the Constitution. It's not to any sort of specific principles. They're just willing to take on whatever they're told. And as I told Dan Bongino in the first podcast I ever did, the scariest thing, the reason we got a raid at Mar-a-Lago was because we had people that were married to their paycheck and their pension. They did it during COVID. They're doing it today. They'll do it in a couple years when they go after the GOP again. And so what was the guy who was the number 2 at the Bureau doing? He's just reading stories about crossfire hurricanes, worrying about the guardrails, realizing that they failed, and then he quit before he fixed the guardrails or any of the things that were wrong. He said the same thing on his own show when he was talking to Vince Colonnese the other day. And then he went on Sean Hannity, and he announced basically nothing to see here. I was shaken to my core because I realized that those people were animals, and they retired. And how many of them have been arrested for what they did? How many of them were charged with conspiracy against rights, 18 U.S.C. 241, like Don Lemon and some of these other guys? Any of them? Did anyone get held accountable? Is there any deep state fix that we were told was there forever? No. It makes people who are looking at the midterms that are in the sort of seat that I'm in as an independent go, what the hell's the difference between you guys? Maybe we see what the other side does just because I don't care. I kind of want to see you hit the gas pedal. Let's find out what happens when the other side gets there. They seem really entertaining and crazy. And I've had more than one person who is an independent conservative, like a couple of prominent names that you would recognize, reach out to me and say, I don't know why it's scarier, but this administration is actually scarier to me than the previous one because this one stabs us in the back and they pretend more. Yo, that should unsettle you. These are names that many of you listen to on a daily basis. And you're like, oh, that's not okay. But also the guardrails failed and these people were animals.
And I was reading through some stuff that you can only read in the office, and it just involved basically the collusion hoax, Crossfire Hurricane, as it went by, and the various other spinoffs. And when you read from the inside, Sean, when you see the details of what these just absolute animals did.
When you have special knowledge from the inside that nobody else can have except me, and I'm going to go out and tell you the truth about it now. But I can't really tell you what it is. But broadly speaking, I'm going to tell you this thing about what's going on. Because I read those files. Does anyone actually believe that Bongino read files that were there? Does anyone actually believe that he understands how to use the Sentinel file server? It's not actually that intuitive. It takes you a couple of months to figure out what you're doing with it. Maybe he's really bright. I think he got briefed on whatever he wanted. And they just showed him whatever they wanted. That's just what I think. The guy who used to talk about how briefers would control the narrative got controlled, and he even said it in his own Fox interviews. We'll continue this on for a second.
To President Trump and the barriers that broke
That's
down
what we're worried about.
And the guardrails, it was, I mean, I'm not shocked often, Sean. I'm really not. I'm not, again, I'm not trying to put on some faux set of armor. I'm just not shocked often. I've lived 1,000 lifetimes between the Secret Service, the NYPD, running for office.
You worked in law enforcement, you tried to be a politician, and then you did podcasts. That's not 1,000 lifetimes, buddy. Just saying. Some of us have worked a bunch of different jobs in a bunch of different career fields, and they were completely unrelated. That's not it.
TV shows and all this other stuff. Just reading through it and seeing it in detail for the first time all put together, you can run a republic like this. You can't. Wow. You absolutely cannot. It was just stunning how all these guardrails broke down at the exact same time, and nobody there. Thank God there was it was and still is a long-ranging investigation into this stuff, because it's just frightening how no one thought to speak up and say, hey, man, not only is this wrong, this is like demonic. This is evil stuff.
Let me just tell you, and the best part of that whole story is that if you do speak up and you do bring forward things, then you can count on the nothing that these people will unleash when they get power. If anybody wants to know why I don't much care for Republicans, it's because they didn't do jack or shit for me and my family. Not even a little bit. They didn't do anything for my friend Garrett O'Boyle. They didn't do anything for my buddy Steve Friend. They didn't do anything for the 10 other people, Marcus Allen and others. They did almost nothing. They did the least possible. And we are sitting here flirting with the idea that DOJ might settle with us for a blatant violation of federal law, which I have documented in no uncertain terms in black and white. The FBI violated federal law in their employment of me personally. I can just attest to what I know. I have it sitting here on my computer. They know they did it too. They actually testified that the guy who got fired for violating COVID policies and federal law while doing so, he got fired for it. The DOJ is fighting the case, trying to make sure that they don't actually have to face any sort of justice for it, and that there's no justice for me and my family. And what did these guys do when they got in there? Nothing. They still haven't paid Garrett O'Boyle his back pay. Do you know that they owe him like $500,000? Same thing with Steve Friend. $300,000, $400,000, not paid. You got in, you saw the guardrails were down, these absolute animals. They hurt Donald Trump's very, very important feelings. They went out there and did a ridiculous raid. Did you get rid of all the people that were in the leadership that made those decisions? No, you did not. You didn't even know who they were because you dummies didn't even understand it, and you had to go and follow me on X to be able to figure out what's going on. Do you know how sad and stupid it is? This is why it's not a black pill moment. This is an honest assessment of reality. We told you how to get rid of all the people. The only way you could do it is to clear the flippin' decks. Everybody that was a GS-15 and above signed off on making supervisors screw over the employees, and they did it so they could get compliance of the workforce to do all the illicit activities. That's what they did. No uncertain terms. I'm not mincing words. They didn't do the thing they were supposed to do. They did the who's the problem? You. You speak out, you're the issue. You have religious opinions, you're gone. You want to hold fast to them, your job is over, and you'll never work in this field again. We're sitting there trying to figure out what's the value of I never get to be in law enforcement again. I didn't have a public profile. I got off Facebook. Funny stories about that, but you guys that listen on the call-in show, you guys have heard it. I got off Facebook in like 2005 or 6. It was a college thing for me so I could connect with classmates. I didn't have any social media on purpose until 2022. And the reason is because I didn't want to be a public figure. I didn't want to sit here behind a microphone and talk to people and say what was going on. This is a survival mechanism for me. My house is ringed with cameras because I think that there's a really decent chance that FBI that's being run by Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, both of whom have lied to me, those people could come and try to kick in my door. And the reason I know they would do it is because I've seen how they treat their own. How will they treat you? They'll treat anybody that's advantageous to them keeping the paycheck and the pension, the golden handcuffs, quoting Dan Bongino, September of 2022, when he and I sat down for the first time. Some of us haven't changed our message. Weaponized government means government that's willing to serve itself and not anybody else. Or maybe we could say it in a slightly different way. And how about Sean Ryan, who can say something real simple? This is why the Epstein files continue to be interesting to everybody that thinks that there was some malfeasance and we don't trust the narrative that's coming out.
They're legitimate. They are legitimately, proactively protecting pedophiles.
They are protecting pedophiles at this point.
By redacting the abusers' names. The White House, listen up, everybody. The fucking White House is protecting pedophiles. You hear that? They're fucking protecting pedophiles. That's what the fuck they're doing.
That's about as clear as you could get down to it. Is it true? We don't actually know. Could they dissuade us from that? Absolutely. Would they have to put out the information in a way that was actually coherent and tangible and present like a case brief like any normal person would, which is what you would do? By the way, the FBI does this every single day. They go to a United States attorney and they say, here's the case we have. This is what we have. This is the skeleton. This is the opening EC. This is the predication for the investigation. These are the investigative steps that we took. These are the resources we used. These are the tactics and techniques and the various different legal processes we did to gather evidence, search warrants. We did some subpoenas. Maybe we did some witness interviews. We recruited sources. We did technical surveillance, blah, blah, blah. And the end result is the following. This is the entirety of what we think is there. These are the likely violations of federal law or not. And here's what we recommend. Prosecution or declamation. What do you think? They could do that to the American people easily. So easily. Or they could just dump 3 million files and just say, you figure it out, dummy, which is what they've done. And so all you're going to get is more sort of speculation and a lot of questions and Sean Ryan saying that and people getting mad at Tom Massey or Ro Khanna. That was Ro Khanna being interviewed there on the Sean Ryan show. That's what you're going to get. And Dan Bongino's really concerned about Crossfire Hurricane and the animals that broke the guardrails that he didn't go in and reestablish. The number 4 at the FBI is currently a DEI hire that was promoted under Comey and under Chris Wray. And she's not an agent, and she's not a sworn federal law enforcement officer. She's just some chick who speaks German. Shannon Perry is still at the FBI. Chris Wray, the number 2, was a guy that signed off on, as an ASAC, the most convenient thing possible. The continuation of an investigation into Christine Crowder, who was the wife of a federal air marshal, was a Catholic school teacher, who was paralyzed on the left side, and they predicated an entire case and terrorist watch listed her. Why? Because they had a picture of a woman waving with her left arm at the Capitol on January 6th. The guy that was okay with those things being done. If you were in charge of the counterterrorism division of your little field office, wherever you were between the years of early 2021 and now, at any time, you co-signed on and signed off on January 6 prosecutions, 100%. And the crazy part is you did them not as a criminal investigation, but under the national security guise, because you actually helped paint every single J6er as a domestic terrorist. All those assholes still have jobs. All of them do. The people that promoted in those spaces that are still working their way up the chain, they all came up under that system. They all agreed to it. They were all complicit, and they were all part of the problem. And nobody cleared the decks because these guys didn't have the balls to do it. And they mistakenly didn't call up the right people and ask, hey, how do we get rid of everybody? We would have told them. We would have told them that we had a guy who was willing to come in and do it and take all of the heat for it. And then he would have retired and have no friends in the FBI. And you could have brought in a conquering hero and let Dan Bongino do the job after the hard stuff was done. You could have brought in a real hatchet man, but you didn't. What you did instead is you faked it, and now you came back to talk about it. And we're really confident and bullish on the midterms. We're feeling awesome about it. Does that tell you anything? Let me go to this crazy thing, because actually we're going to go a little bit longer today, because this, after the weekend, I read this and I was like, cool, this is some really wild stuff, and this is what I actually want to watch. This is a guy named Peter Gurnis, claims he's a hacker. He's got a pretty good sized following. It sounds like he's the person that he says he is. Take this with a grain of salt for what it is. He talks about a game they play at DEF CON, which is a hacker convention. And he says they call it Spot the Fed. In Washington, D.C., we call that game Spot the Spook. It happens at every dinner party. It's when people are there from the State Department and everyone tries to guess, are they CIA? Are they DIA? Are they NSA? Do they actually work for the State Department, or are they just pretending? So here you go. Spot the Fed. He said last week the Department of Federal Justice, the Department of Justice released 3 million files of Epstein documents. I read them professionally, not for names, but for the tradecraft. The tradecraft is immaculate. Here's what made me put my coffee down. This stuff is interesting, and I haven't personally validated this, so I'm reading it, seeing that it got a big reaction, and then this is the kind of stuff that should actually come out of these files, not like the end talk garbage where like some random name was mentioned. An FBI informant told authorities in 2017, that's going to be on an FD 1023. That means somebody reported it and they have their own motivation, so it could be true. It might not be. He said that Epstein had a quote unquote personal hacker, an Italian, someone from the South region of Calabria. I've met hackers from Calabria at DEF CON, at Black Hat. The informant said that the hacker developed zero-day exploits for iOS, for BlackBerry, and for Firefox. The informant said that the hacker sold the exploits to the United States government, to the United Kingdom, to an unnamed Central African Republic government, and to Hezbollah. Hezbollah paid with, quote, a trunk of cash. Not sure how the United States government pays. They usually pay in purchase orders. That's actually not true if you're talking about sources. They pay in cash. The exploits were the same, 0-day, different payment methods, different clients, same hacker. Speaking of hackers in Epstein's emails, if you've been to Black Hat, you know his name. He's on the Black Hat conference board. He co-founded the Trail of Bits. He wrote the iOS Hacker Handbook. On April 14th, 2018, the hacker sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein's personal email address. Subject line, New Yorker. Reference House Oversight and some numbers. I don't know what was in the email, but the email exists. It's in the files. It's a congressional oversight document. These are the kind of things that I think should really be in there. This meant something to someone that did this investigation. This story, this handling agent had a write-up about it. This is the stuff that should have been of value. This is what we should have been presented with. Not some random data dump, but a consistent and coherent organization of here's where the case was predicated, here's the evidence we had, here's where it led us to, these are the dead ends, this is why we closed them down in this specific area, not a one-page memo released on Axios in July of 2025. He goes on talking about how the U.S. security officials are talking about Epstein running the world's largest honey trap operation, that he worked for the Russian intelligence, the KGB. The document mentions Putin 1,056 times, Moscow 9,600 times. Stories about having meetings with Putin. This is talking about Jeffrey Epstein having them. Meeting up with Robert Maxwell. This is the stuff that everybody has been putting together on their own, and we have questions like, what the hell is there? Yes, this is a frustrating format. He refers to it as breadcrumbs. I found it very frustrating because it's very long. I will also link this in the show comments today so you guys can read it yourself. This is where the actual, this is where you're actually going to get some information, is going into the email chains back and forth. It's not going to be in some sort of random end talk piece. It's not going to be in some, photograph with no context and you don't know who the people are and maybe they're of age and maybe they're not and maybe they're redacted in some way that looks, you can shade the narrative just like they shaded the Rosa Parks story. You can make it look like something when it's actually not. So all of that is going on. In the meantime, it's against the backdrop of what? We've got this growing insurgency happening in Minneapolis. It's happening in other cities too. And interestingly enough, I'm seeing people, and I'm going to end with this stuff talking about the ICE, catastrophe that continues. We're seeing this breakdown where people are looking at the federal government and going, oh, the federal government's not to be trusted. We have to rely on the states. Yes, but there are actually some legitimate functions of the federal government, even if you are on the hard right. For those of us that think government is the worst answer to every question, including when it's the only answer, we still think that there's a function for the federal government. It may not be a big one, and I would like to see it funded by tariffs, as Donald Trump promised, and I would like 90% of the federal government to disappear and go away and be divested to the states. Interstate commerce is not a blanket justification for a 4 million person employment umbrella and a jobs program, but that's what we have. It's funny to watch the left suddenly get into that. It's also funny to see people on leftist type outlets, and this is on PBS, pick up the talking points that I've been sharing with you guys. And the talking point I've been talking about is when you have the local government fail to protect citizens at the local level and do the actual charter and job that they have, then you're going to necessarily have bad things happen from the federal agents that are doing it, because the federal government, just like they went into Mar-a-Lago, just like the first sort of break in the armor when I lost the support of Julie Kelly, who, by the way, I gave all kinds of context to when she was trying to investigate what the FBI did with source handling and other stuff, because she didn't know. She didn't even know the FBI doesn't wear a uniform. One thing that's true is federal use of force, it's not the same as local, and it can be super dangerous to the people that are going to be on the other end of it. You don't have to play around as a federal agent. It's a very permissive deadly force policy. It's right on the edge of Graham v. Connor, which we've talked about here a number of times. So I will play you PBS actually picking up the talking points that we've been bringing out to you. Before we do, real quick, you guys may hear an ad from Spotify. You can find Spotify by going to KyleSeraphinShow.com. If you're listening and you're not viewing, you're missing out at least on some of the show. There's some of it should be visual, and it's interesting. So check that out. Join us over there. You can join us on Locals if you want to support the program financially, if you want to keep us going. We are independent, and I don't have to answer to anybody, so my thoughts are my own. Some of you guys actually tell me that means it's kind of like an island where you can get some sanity. Subscribe to the channel wherever you guys are watching. Like it, share it with a friend. We'd appreciate all of that. Let's do this quick little bit of picking up the talking points we've been sharing with you. It's nice to see this go to left-wing media.
Gary, what about you? Do you agree with the majority in this poll here that ICE has been too aggressive? What's your take?
I'm sure that, that's what they've been hearing. That's kind of the media narrative about it. But let's remember why there's a lot of ICE enforcement going on in Minnesota and in Minneapolis in particular, because people are led to believe that these sanctuary cities are a real thing. And they're not a real thing. By the way, it's good to be back with you and Jonathan tonight. Sanctuary cities, there's no sanctuary for being in the country illegally. Federal agents are allowed to come in and do their job and enforce the law. The only thing sanctuary cities does is it allows local leaders not to cooperate with them with law enforcement, not to, they can tell law enforcement, we're not going to cooperate with them. And when that happens, and I thought Tom Homan did a really good job yesterday of laying this out. When that happens, it requires ICE, Border Patrol, federal agents to also then do law enforcement and to do crowd control. And these are not things that they're good at. And to me, and I know, people look at this so differently, whether you're kind of from the left or whether you're more conservative, as I am. I look at this and I say, why is Governor Walz and Mayor Fry, why are they encouraging people to come out and confront law enforcement and to confront ICE agents, to confront federal agents? We were told back on January 6, 2021, how horrible it was that officers, that law enforcement had been attacked on that day of that riot. And I agree with that. I'm with you on that. But I'm also with you on it now. I'm saying it's terrible to confront these folks who are just trying to do their jobs to enforce the law that Congress passed. And we need governors and mayors to encourage citizens, stay out of the way while they do this enforcement. Don't put yourself in harm's way.
Oh, you mean ICE enforces laws passed by Congress, so there's actually a way that you can handle this if you wanted to do it and maybe don't do dumb stuff? Isn't it interesting how it always comes back to January 6th? January 6th was a reaction to the weird, let's call it weird, bizarre, unexpected, very questionable outcomes of the 2020 election. And the 2020 election hinged so dramatically on, these are not like these are direct hops. The 2020 election hinged a lot of ways on what happened during COVID, including a lot of the sort of absentee balloting and all that kind of crazy stuff. It all comes to COVID. Did we get any answers on that while certain people were in charge of the FBI? Nah. Did we get any answers about what happened during the 2020 election? Have we solved those problems? Nah. Have we gotten rid of any of the people that were involved in the deep state collaboration that's been alleged and all the sort of scandalous stuff? Did we get even any investigation into anything other than the pipe bomber where they ended up with an autistic brony instead of someone who was connected to any mechanism of government who would have known where the cameras were and would have known what was going on when we're talking about, I don't know, like when we're talking about someone who pulled off such an elaborate scheme to evade the FBI for a full 5 years. Did anybody get any answers on this stuff over the last year and change since we've had Trump in? No. And what are you seeing on the screen? Female FBI agent, always interesting, with a Coke and some 7-Eleven stuff, interviewing Brian Cole Jr. You've got this picture now from the interview room, which they video recorded. And we're going to find out more and more what the hell's going on with that case, which is problematic. I'm going to spend some time this week on it. I'm going to catch up on it. We might even see if we can get Joe Hanneman to come back and talk about what's been happening in that case. But just to let you know, there's a story that I'm going to link in the show description today, or it's going to actually link in the comments below on YouTube and on Rumble. And it's the pipe bomber prosecutors are insinuating that it's very reckless. Sorry, the defense team is saying that it's very reckless that the pipe bomber prosecutors have insinuated that Brian Cole Jr.'s family was involved. Because you can't make it the case that a guy who couldn't take care of himself was doing this all on his own. So now they've sort of insinuated that the family's there. And anything they can do, and this is eventually going to fall apart, and I'm very confident of that. I keep telling you guys that, because Brian Cole Jr. wasn't in two places at once. And we've already shown all you need to show to a DC jury that you're not going to get that conviction. It's not going to happen. And imagine showing this interview that they did, this interrogation. You can see him there just sitting. Anyhow, we're going to get into all that in a minute, too. A little deeper onto the moment as we kind of wrap up. That idea that you can attack federal agents, that you can do whatever the hell you want, that the federal government doesn't have like some legitimate function. The theory in de-weaponizing government is to make government serve the mission that actually serves the people instead of government serving its own purposes. It's pretty clear that neither side is interested in doing that. It's pretty clear that nobody seems to understand that when you put people in danger by letting them go after a machine that is going to do exactly what the machine does, you unleash federal agents on somebody, they're going to show up with a deadly force policy in play, and they're going to do the thing they're supposed to do, which is like, raid Mar-a-Lago or pick up ICE detainees. If only we could just get them in a nonviolent way. This is the myth of letting the toddlers behave as toddlers for far too long. I thought this is what Donald Trump was coming in to stop. It's not. That's why we're having these reactions out on the streets of Minneapolis. But in theory, you should be asserting that there is no such thing as a sanctuary policy and taking money from anybody that has ridiculous laws that say that. They can't do it. You can demand it, and you can actually put contingencies on the dollars that you give to the states. Like, look, I don't want the federal government to do a lot of things. I don't even want it to exist in most places. But it turns out gathering up people out of local jails that have committed crimes that are meant to be deported, that seems super easy. And it turns out that people on the left don't even realize what a sanctuary city is and that it's not a real thing.
Could ICE agents be at the door of the county jail? And when an undocumented immigrant has served their time or is released, could they grab him? Yes, there's nothing stopping them from doing that.
That's what a detainer is. That's what we're all talking about.
That's what a nice detainer but why do you need a detainer?
And again, just to go back,
so I got the numbers for you. Flood the streets of Minneapolis with 3,000 agents.
I don't think that's what Anna's saying. I think
that is a nice detainer.
Hold on.
That is a detainer request being honored.
No.
Holding the person until ICE comes and picks them up.
There's nothing stopping an ICE agent.
From waiting at the front door, hoping that an illegal immigrant comes out the jail.
No.
Joe, hang on a second.
The names of the people who are detained in a county jail are public information. Anybody in the media can get them. Any of us can get those names. So they could run those names, know who is here illegally, if there's anybody illegally, know when their sentences is up. And yes, it would, you know what? It would be a lot less costly to the businesses in Minneapolis, to the city of Minneapolis, to us as taxpayers if they put two ICE agents at the door of the county jail than if they have 3,000 agents terrorizing and occupying an American city.
She literally doesn't know what an ICE detainer is and how stupid that situation is. You want to have your ICE agents tied up sitting and babysitting and waiting till someone's let out of jail by the front door? Like some girlfriend who's sitting there in their sweatpants and picking up the boyfriend that beat them up? Cool. That sounds perfectly useful. What a great way to spend our money. Okay, fine. Or you could do this. You could also just say that as the mayor of Chicago, we're going to just arrest these guys. This is how crazy the other side. Look, both sides suck for whatever it's worth. And it's not me just sitting here saying there's no solution. There's obviously a solution. The solution is just not what either side is selling us. And that's why people look at it and just go like, I just need to skeptically, can you just give me information and then we could just try to suss out what's the accurate stuff? Because this is all posturing and theater.
We need to send a clear message. If the federal government will not hold these rogue actors accountable, then Chicago will do everything in our power to bring these agents to justice. As part of this order, our police department will document ICE and Border Patrol activity and attempt to identify officers on the scene. This evidence will then be preserved and, at the direction of my office, will be referred to the state's attorney's office for potential prosecution. The Trump administration has made it clear that they do intend to return to our city in force in the coming spring. This order is a step towards making sure that Chicago is prepared. We will continue to learn from and work with other cities across the country as we all confront this moment.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So we got that going on. Finally. Okay, so finally, now we're going to quote Dr. Martin Luther King because it has something to do with ICE. Nobody really knows. How about you just don't let people attack federal agents for their own safety, because then federal agents might have to kill them, or you could have these scenes play out on things like CNN.
You can see an officer back there. He's alone, and they're just throwing things at him. I mean, it's just pretty incredible that these protesters have overtaken this, and there's no police. I don't see anybody here to kind of manage this crowd. So like I was saying, this is at the tail end of a very long day. Looks like they're cheering because they were able to push that officer back inside. Okay, and now people, okay, all right, hold on. Do you see the police?
Yeah, I see people not doing the job of the actual level of government they have, just like our Congress doesn't go out and actually pass laws and appropriate money the way that they're meant to do. Our executive is now trying to make policy and pass their own laws under executive orders and all this kind of stuff, which is not what they're meant to do. And our cities and our states are not doing the job that they're meant to do, which is to look out for their citizens and, keep the peace on the streets and make sure people don't do dumb things like drive their car in or stop traffic in places that are totally dangerous. All of this stuff is people failing to do their basic job. And everybody wants to do a job that's not theirs. Isn't that it? If people just stayed in their lane and actually did the thing that they were charged with doing, then it would work fine. And if people who stepped up and said they were going to fix the problems actually, one, had a really good grasp on the problem, two, actually had some solutions to it, and then they actually carried them out, which is the worst part because nobody wants to do that. It reminds me of the demotivator. I can't help but have it. It used to be on my desk when I worked in the federal government. It said consultants. If you're not going to be part of the solution, there's a ton of money to be made in continuing the problem. And that is the nature of our current government. Briefly, I think the most government version, the most accurate sort of wrap up, and the best thing that I can do with the midterm are coming sort of attitude that Mike Johnson has is play you something from Lindsey Graham. Mike Johnson, we let off the program letting you know that they've got some real great candidates out there in the field, the best candidates, the most amount of money raised. And one of them is this guy. And you just tell me who doesn't want to vote for a man that sounds like he tied on a pretty late night as a single adult white male in his 60s, totally normal to not be able to put a couple of words together. I don't know if he's having a stroke or he's still drunk from the night before, but this is the best candidates. So this is what you guys are voting for.
I'd say they're going to push for it.
Well, what we're going to do is, I'm not going to agree. That would grind it to a halt. If you had a judicial warrant and all these things, you couldn't deal with mass. We're not dealing with we're trying to get people out of the country of no right to be here, Judge. Have people who are illegal immigrants. You remember Kim Davis?
I do.
Okay, who's Kim Davis, folks? Nothing to do with illegal immigration. Kim Davis was a clerk of court in Kentucky. The Supreme Court ruled that the law of the land was that gay marriage was legal, that gay marriage was recognized under the U.S. Constitution. If you didn't recognize gay marriage, you violated the Equal Protection Clause. She's a religious conservative. People applied, two gay guys applied for a marriage license. She said
I won't burden you with it much more. These are the best candidates. That's the best thing about him. We got old, sloppy. I think he's probably sick. Let me just be fair. I don't know that he's drunk or hungover or whatever. I mean, it's possible that he was doing coke all night the night before and then he just didn't have the wherewithal to do another bump before he went on there. That's a possibility. I don't know what his habits are. That's me being funny about it. The odds are he's probably feeling sick like so many of us were. I was sick all last week. When you're sick, and you're already a slow-talking, slurring, kind of sloppy dude, maybe just cancel the media appearance. Maybe you don't need to do that media appearance. Or maybe you just create highlight reels so I can play them and I can laugh about this stuff. Somebody in the chat earlier said, you got taken in, Seraphin, because you thought Donald Trump was going to be conservative. Check the tapes, y'all. I said it to you a year ago. Donald Trump is not a conservative. Donald Trump has never been a conservative. Donald Trump is essentially a 90s liberal. And he hasn't really changed all that much. His party left him. He was a Democrat. He's still essentially a 90s Democrat, the way that I grew up with what Democrats were, back when we all kind of agreed on one thing. And this is what I think the fundamental change has been in the last 30 years. My entire adult life has been this movement. We've gone from everybody agreeing that America's the good guy, that we all understand that we want people to be taken care of. We want good outcomes for our neighbors. We expect to be able to protect our borders and to have sort of like sanity. We want to raise our children and we want them all to be wealthier and better off than we were when we were growing up. That was the American value and the dream that I grew up with. And that is left. And I'm not even sure either side represents that anymore. So the bacon cheeseburger nationalist position, which by the way, that's my tongue-in-cheek way of just saying something real simple. We're just regular people from 30 years ago that looked around and said, where the hell did everyone else go? And the left ran off the cliff of wild radical leftism and focused in on being like Marxists, socialists, communists, maniacs, completely unhinged weirdos. That's where they went. And the right did the same thing. They just didn't go quite as far. They went the speed limit when they did it. Let me give you an example. I'm not suggesting that anybody on the left is doing something significantly better because they have people like this in their party. This is their version of Lindsey Graham, and this is hilariously weird. This is why those of us that are in the post-partisan world, the bacon cheeseburger nationalist is a post-partisan. We don't believe in a party at all because all the parties suck because they're fielding candidates like Lindsey Graham or this lady.
Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. You matter.
You matter. Is she okay? I know that's not a recent clip. Sorry to drop that on you. I understand that there are people that have completely lost it. So if that's what the left is and the right is not even close, I'm going to give you the funniest thing here. What was something that we've said on this program since the beginning? And then we're going to have to get to Don Lemon another day because why not? This is one of the most amusing little, this is our Senate Majority Leader saying what I have been telling you on this program. I think this is my analysis of it for a very long time. I believe that the political right in this country does not have a home. It does not have a party, and that the so-called rhinos are conservatives that are Republicans. If you're a rhino, you're a conservative Republican. You actually believe in conservatism. You want to conserve something. You think that traditional values make sense. You're a regular person from 30, 35, 40 years ago, and you haven't moved all that much. You go to church. You think that God is the center of your life. You think that your children have value and they're more important than any job you do. You think that your neighbors are important. You care about them individually, but you don't want the government to come in and fix their problems. You'd like to do it with private charity. You'd like to have taxes lower. You'd like to own things. You'd like to have upward mobility and be able to offer from middle class to upper middle class to your kids. Like, you know, normal American stuff. If you're a conservative, you are now the rhino. And I've been saying this for literally years on this program, which is amazing because I've been doing this program for a couple of years now. That's even crazier. Here's our Senate Majority Leader getting to that point where he's going to call himself a rhino. He's actually recognizing the stuff that I keep saying. The Republican Party doesn't represent us. So if you're going to go out there and cheerlead about the midterms, you're going to act like the GOP is a solution to anything, you've already lost me. I can't follow you on that because it doesn't make any sense. And when you guys had a chance to do stuff, all you've proven is that you don't do anything. Here we go. Ready? Here's Tillis.
I think for the first time in my life, I may actually be a rhino.
Well, there's a headline.
The Republican Party has drifted so far away from limited government, free markets, and federalism, which are the bedrock of any conservative thinker. I'm beginning to sort this out. I know that we're going through a populist phase. I expect it to settle down, but Republicans are at their best when we are talking about free markets, free trade, federalism. Limited government, and we're drifting from that, and we drift from that. We're no different than the Democrats, and that lack of differentiation causes us to lose elections.
Can you put the toothpaste back in the tube, though? Because the President Trump has been such a disruptor to this party.
Yeah, you can. Look, I mean, I want the president to be successful. I'm a business person. I work on a transaction basis. I could sit down with him and come up with things that I'd love to support him on. I think that's the mistake that some people have made here. They just get so frustrated that maybe they realize they weren't Republicans. So then they become backbenchers are constantly criticizing. Again, I support the majority of what this administration is trying to do. They have.
Great. My bad. By the way, that's Tom Tillis. He's from North Carolina. He is not the Senate Majority Leader. I crossed my tall, similar-looking white guys together because we have so many boomers that are sitting in these places. Yeah, he may be a complete piece of garbage. I get it. But what he's saying is not wrong, and that's what's really interesting to me. Recognizing that Republicans, the rhinos, are the conservative party that actually wants smaller government, 100%. That doesn't mean he votes that way. It doesn't mean that he actually says anything that he means. I don't believe any of that stuff, and neither should you. I'm just saying, the words he said are accurate. It's funny to have people admit it out loud. It's different than you see from some of these other garbage. So there you have it. And apologies for getting them mixed up here. You guys can go look at the Liberty scores that you want on your own. Last little bit, Fox News. This is pure evidence to me that we are not doing conservatism in the so-called political right. This woman had a platform at the GOP's convention. The woman with a tattoo on her freaking forehead. Every time I see this, I cannot fathom what would make anybody get a tattoo on their face. Like, I'm still sketchy on the people who have them on your neck. If I see a tattoo on your neck, I'm just a regular guy from 25, 30 years ago. I feel like you're probably a felon. You may not be, but I just think you might be because I don't know anybody else that gets tattoos on their necks. If you get it on your face, I'm just shaking my head over here. I don't know what causes you to do that. This woman is an OnlyFans person. Her name is Amber Rose, and she's prominently now, she was the first story when I typed in Erika Kirk because a video dropped of her from 6 days after Charlie Kirk's assassination, and she's talking very, very weirdly. She's talking in a way that is truly bizarre. Everything about Erika Kirk is strange to me. That doesn't mean that I think Candace Owens is right, by the way. It just means that I think she's really weird, and she was always not my kind of people. Erika Kirk wearing gaudy clothes and fireworks and doing that. I told you guys at the time, this BS about like, oh, you can't talk about a grieving widow. You can talk about a grieving widow when the grieving widow decides to make herself a public spectacle. Then we have to talk about it. And when you have an OnlyFans like prostitute going out there and defending you, I'm not sure that's the flex that you think it is, but here it is. This is the Fox headline from this from Friday going into the week. Sorry, from Saturday going into the weekend here. And again, that picture with the face. The picture with the face tattoo, it continues to baffle me that anybody would choose to do this voluntarily. And so, yeah, I would say that when that person is defending you, you've probably lost it, probably lost the thread. And there's nothing conservative about the party that does that. So I don't know what the hell you're conserving, but certainly not normal values, certainly not by putting pornographic content creators with face tattoos up as a thing, and then a woman who cries some sort of demon chant thing from the Harmeet Dillon, all that stuff. It's not bacon cheeseburger nationalism. So there you go. All right. Support the program wherever you can by giving us just a free like. It costs you nothing. I'd appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you guys like some of these takes, if you like to argue with me, I enjoy that too. Put it in the comments. I do read the comments. Do them over on Spotify, KyleSeraphinShow.com. Easiest way to do it. The comment section on Spotify is easily the most interactive for me. So if you definitely want to make sure I see it, I go there first. The other ones are a little bit harder sometimes, but I read them as well. Rumble and YouTube. You guys are all appreciated. I have a palate cleanse for you. It's just funny. Can we just laugh about stuff that's truly funny when people do weird things? There is a lady who does some really weird things. And since she was brought up earlier, somebody said, I'm part of the cult of Candace Owen. I don't think I am. Because I get videos like this in my feed and they make me smirk big time. Here's Candace Owens struggling to pronunciate. You'll see why that's funny.
Hey, Candace, let's do a take and just be mindful of the pronunciations. Let's not do anything weird.
I have so many explosive revelations to share with you.
Oh, wait. No, it's revelations. You know what? We can move on.
If you can't compartmentalize.
No, sweetheart, it's compartmentalized. Just take that one more time.
You have to be able to compartmentalize that.
Compartmentalize.
And we have to compartmentalize. Compartmentalize how you feel about somebody personally.
Are you doing this on purpose? Is this a bit? Are you trying to get clicks or something?
Can't compartmentalize. But really, it was about the architecture.
Oh, this is the big one. It's architecture.
You just like the architecture.
Architecture, not architecture.
Love the architecture.
Architecture.
Yeah, no, like he loved the architecture of things.
You really don't know how these words are pronounced? You speak for a living.
Prince Harry abdicates England, causes this whole race kerfluffle.
Oh, no, it's kerfuffle.
We knew a kerfluffle happened.
Kerfuffle.
Because this dress kerfluffle.
Pronounced kerfuffle. Kerfuffle.
Designed quite literally with the intention to mock me and Tucker Carlson. It's always got to be Tucker Carlson, Cameron Owens.
It's Candace Owens. It's Candace. Let's cut here. I'm going to go take my life.
If we could at least laugh about some funny stuff. We all have a flub every once in a while where we say the words wrong, but if you say it repeatedly, it's kind of bad. I try not to do that. I'm going to aspire to do better pronunciation. Lindsey Graham can do it. What was her name? Candace? I can't even do the fake pronunciations. It's too hard for me to do that. Candace Owens does it too. All right. There we go. So we'll just laugh about that. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. I hope you have a fantastic Monday as you start your week, and it's going to be an interesting one. As usual, we are living in strange and trying times. We'll try to point out some of the ridiculousness as we go. God bless. See you on the other side of it. Have a great Monday.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.